Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl Podcast is sponsorship and ad-free thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting your favourite podcast and becoming a patron, please check out patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. There's currently over 230 patrons supporting the mission to help me increase the amount of female role models. Take action now and become one of them. I just want to take a moment to say a massive thank you to Deborah Holt, Kevin Masters, Sarah Bright, Zoe Langley-Watham, and Katja Lunaire. Your continued support is so much appreciated. I am delighted that we are going to be speaking to Veronica Ribot de Cañales, who is, now let me get this right, is a retired female diver from Argentina. She competed in 3 consecutive Summer Olympics for her native country, starting in 1984, claiming a silver and bronze medal in the women's 10-meter platform at the Pan American Games.
My name is Veronica, and I am currently a yoga teacher, but I spent most of my life training in diving from a young age, growing up in the Bahamas. I have 2 children, age 21 and 18. Let's see, I was a previous Division I diving coach at Cornell University for 8.5 years, and then 2 years ago, I started my career as a yoga teacher.
Oh my God, I love it. There's so much stuff in there that I want to talk about.
Oh, I did leave something out though, didn't I?
What did you leave out?
I left out that when I met my fiance 5 years ago, I started training on new boards, stand-up paddle boards, and got into stand-up paddleboard racing with him. And then 2 years ago, before I took my 200-hour yoga teacher training, I actually got my certification in stand-up paddleboard yoga first. So we do the practices on paddleboards, but I also like to race in the summertime.
Great. And it'll be really interesting to talk about, getting into that as well. But I want to go back to your childhood. So you were born in Argentina, but you grew up in the Bahamas. Is that right?
Yes, I was born in Buenos Aires. And then in the middle of 2nd grade, my family got an opportunity to move to Freeport, Grand Bahama. My mother was in real estate. And so we were like, oh, let's go move to paradise. And so that's what we did.
Oh, it does. Yeah. It sounds incredible. And is that where you first got into diving and swimming?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have an older brother. He's a year and a half older than me. And he began swimming, actually. He was racing in Argentina. But when we moved to the Bahamas, it was suggested by my doctors that I should get into swimming because I had this terrible cough and asthma and getting shots all the time for all the coughing. My poor parents in the living room listening to me cough as I went to sleep at night. So when we moved to Freeport and having such a lovely climate year round, sunshine and fresh air, and so our parents stuck us into the swim team at the YMCA in Freeport. And that's how I got my start in the water. So I started swimming, and then I always kind of looked for my own limelight because my brother was this very good swimmer, always getting all the awards. And so I kind of wanted to find my own, special place. And that's how I started diving.
And what was it like? I mean, was it just that you saw other people doing it and you went over and just thought, I want to give this a go? How did that evolve, and what age did you start diving?
I think I was probably about 8 years old when I started to dive. And before that, in the Bahamas, I was doing everything else. My mother had exposed me to all these things. So I was doing ballet and tap. And, my brother and I both took fencing lessons at the YMCA. What else? Oh, I did gymnastics or acrobatics, whatever they called it back then. I did all kinds of things, and horseback riding. But we swam as a base thing that both my brother and I did. And my mother would take us to the pool and we would swim. But then the diving boards were located at the other side of the pool. And then we would go and take our turn, on the diving boards. And our swimming coach also coached diving. So my brother and I were both practicing diving for a while. And then he just focused on his swimming. But I liked the diving. So I kept doing the diving And it was thrilling because on the one hand, it was scary sometimes to learn a new dive or go off the high board, but then it was exhilarating when you actually did a brand new dive and you just came up smiling, and the feeling was indescribable.
Were you spotted by a coach as somebody who's got, huge amount of potential? Was there a natural ability at diving? Was it something that came, very easy to you, or was it just something more that because you enjoyed it so much, you persevered and carried on and you practiced and just got better and better?
I think it's, I just kept on practicing and kept on doing the sport. Nobody really, yes, I guess, the coaches maybe thought that we had some talent, but they treated all of us the same on the team. And we all tried to do the best we could do and go into some competitions. And I remember my coach, she was a British coach, and she, of course, the Bahamas were the British colony before it got its independence in 1973. My coach, she took my best friend and I to a meet in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, because she thought that it would be good experience for us to get outside of Freeport in the Bahamas to see more competition, obviously. And it was great because my best friend and I we were in two different age groups. So my friend was a little bit older than me. And this is a funny story we tell amongst our family. When my parents were alive, they laughed to themselves because they would say that our coach was really taking my best friend for what she could do. And I was really just going for experience. But I ended up being the one that actually performed better in the competition, which was funny. But it did give us some more exposure to some other experience. And I just kept on training and practicing. And then finally, I think I was about 14 years old, and I had already been to summer camp in the mountains of North Carolina. And on the condition that I would swim, my mother said, you need to swim and keep up your swimming because your asthma and this and that. And I was pretty fed up with swimming. And so I said, oh, yes, I'm going to keep swimming. And then I really didn't swim. I did whatever in camp that I wanted. I rode horses. I didn't, swim like, to train or for my asthma. And then I came back home and I said, well, you know what? I'm not really coughing anymore, so I don't think I'll swim anymore. After the nationals, I'm going to win my 4 events and then I'm going to retire. And so I basically gave her this ultimatum. I said, I'm going to stop swimming. And then I just continued on with my diving. And then it just kept on going. And then when I was in school in the United States as part of one of the schools I went to, because I ended up going to 4 different high schools and not even all in 1-year segments. So I was going to a private girls' school in West Palm Beach, and one of my friend's moms was a coach. So I would always go after school to North Palm Beach and train in her backyard. She had a pool with a regulation board and everything. And so I just continued to pursue this diving in wherever I was living at the time. And it just kind of kept on going until I ended up in Miami, Florida. My family moved eventually to Miami from the Bahamas. And I got to finish my last year of high school in Miami. And as I was diving in Miami for this AAU, Amateur Athletic Union, as it was called back then, team, I said to the coach, I'm looking for a college scholarship because, my brother is up in college in New England. And I kind of came bragging to him that I had been 8th in the state of Connecticut when I was at one time going to school in Connecticut. And he kind of laughed and said, really, 8th in Connecticut, huh? And in any case, I trained through my senior year. And then kind of like a surprise, I ended up winning the Florida High School State Championships. In fact, the headlines in the newspaper read, Ribot pops out of nowhere was the headline. And they had a photo of the other girl that was expected to win. So it was quite funny. It was kind of like, who's this new person? And I won the high school state championships. And that was kind of like the springboard to everything else that started falling into place, because that way my coach did connect me with another diving coach who ended up being my college coach at Boston University for the first 2 years. So actually, when he connected me with this gentleman, I went to kind of perform a tryout. He wanted to see me. But before he actually saw me, he sent his sister down, who was a very good diver for the United States. And so she came down to scope me out. So she came to our age group team, and she looked at me, and then she told her brother. And then I met with her brother at the Hall of Fame in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So he sort of said, you passed with flying colors, and he offered me a diving scholarship. So that's how this kind of got going. And he was really my mentor because at this point, I was 17 years old, and he realized, oh, you're a foreigner. You're born in Argentina. You're an Argentine citizen. So at the time, my father was working in Argentina, and he explains all this to my parents. I was 17. It was about to be the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow, which you're probably too young to know that a lot of countries boycotted because of this political situation at the time, the Afghanistan invasion. And so Jimmy Carter was the president at the time, and the U.S. did the boycott. And we were waiting to find out about Argentina. But anyway, circle back to my coach, who was saying to my parents, you know, Veronica could dive for Argentina. She could dive in the Olympics. And we're like, what? And so my mother calls my father in Buenos Aires, and she says, you know, Cal says Veronica could dive for Argentina in the Olympics. And he's like, oh, are you kidding? They probably have tons of people. And then he went to the Argentine Swim Federation and the Olympic Committee, and they got to talking, and he told them about his daughter living in Miami, Florida. And they were like, oh, we'd love to have her. We don't have anybody diving. It's been years since they had a diver. So they kind of said, and this was in 1979, and they said, well, let's just, you know, you pay for her trip to Puerto Rico to the Pan American Games, and we'll house her with the team in the Olympic Village, you know, in the Pan American Village with the rest of the Argentine contingent. And so that's what happened. My very first international meet for Argentina was the Pan American Games in 1979 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And really it's because of this first college coach I had, Cal Locke, who recognized in this, and because his sister had dived internationally for the U.S., they were a big diving family from Fort Worth, Texas, and they were all into United States diving. And so it was really all because of him who he wrote the necessary letters, contacted people in the U.S., this and that. And then between my father talking to the Argentine Swim Federation, and then they spoke with the Argentine Olympic Committee. And that's how they got me to start representing Argentina.
Oh my goodness, absolutely incredible. What was the Pan American Games like?
Well, it was like, so I think I ended up like in sixth place or something. Right behind it was the Americans and the Canadians, and I was the first of the South Americans. So of course, Argentina was overjoyed that we could now beat Brazil at something, and so they were like just very happy to have me, and it was very neat. I met all kinds of people from, you know, all over, who were competing in the Pan American Games, and it was like a mini Olympics. You know, you saw all these different athletes in different sports, and you were in the village together, and it was quite fun.
Oh my God, it sounds incredible. I mean, how did it then progress going forward? So did you continue to dive for Argentina?
Oh, yeah. It was just, that's like all I knew. You know, once I got with the Argentine contingent, it was like every time there was one of the majors, you know, like well, then what happened then so I went to the 79 Pan Am Games, and then it was going to be my sophomore year in college. It was the 1980 Olympics. And so in Moscow. And so we were trying to see whether Argentina would send me to the Olympics. But then this whole thing with the boycott was happening. And then in the end, you know, and I had articles and everything written about me in Argentina. And in the end, and I actually went to Buenos Aires in 1980 for the South American Championships, and I won one of my two events. I was still very new to the 10-meter platform, so I came second in the platform to a Brazilian diver who ended up being very good friends of mine, because later on she came to America and dove at the University of Miami where I lived. So it was quite funny. But I won the 3-meter springboard event and she won the platform. And so we were, you know, trying to see, well, are they going to go or not? And then Argentina ended up that I was selected to go at 17 years of age. I was selected to go to the 1980 Games, but then Argentina decided to support the boycott. So Argentina did not send a team to Moscow. But that's why we call ourselves, you know, anyone who was in that boycott calls himself an Olympian. I later had a coach who made the 1980 Olympic team, and that would have been his last time going. So he's still an Olympian, but yet they didn't go. They ended up having a dual meet against China, the U.S. divers. And so I call myself a 4-time Olympian, even though physically I attended 3 Olympic Games, because I was chosen by Argentina to be on the Olympic squad in 1980.
What was it like at the Olympics, and how have you seen the Olympics change over the years?
Well, I just remember my first appearance at the 84 LA Games, and it was fabulous, really. We were at University of Southern California, is where it was called the McDonald's Swim Stadium at the time, because that was the sponsor of that of the diving portion there. Oh, and McDonald's was a big sponsor of the Olympic Games too. But it was great. And I was kind of like, I guess I would describe it like a kid in a candy store, when we were walking out they lined us up and we were walking out in the opening ceremonies in the LA Coliseum. I was with my Argentine Olympic teammates, swimmers, because there were no other divers. I was the only diver. So I was with my teammates, and we just remember looking into each other's eyes and kind of grabbing each other by the shoulders and shaking each other going, we're Olympians, we're Olympians. And it was just amazing because we were walking around this track in all our track uniforms, and the place is filled with people screaming and cheering, and it was just surreal. And so that was the first taste of being an Olympian. And I went there to the opening and the closing ceremonies. And then my second time around for Seoul for the 1988 games, I remember that I couldn't march in the opening ceremonies because it was at 11 a.m. and it was during my first event, my platform event. So I wasn't participating in the opening ceremonies. And then I think for Seoul, I ended up leaving early. I didn't go to the closing ceremonies because I left early. I think I got sick. I don't know what happened. And then for Barcelona, again, the same thing. And it's such a kind of an ordeal and a thing you all have to line up, and it takes hours to go to the, for us as athletes to march in the opening ceremonies and the whole preparation of lining all of the countries and everybody up in the Olympic Village and getting on the buses and being transported to the stadium, and then being in a holding stadium somewhere else where you see all of the festivities going on in the actual stadium that you're going to walk into. But you're waiting hours upon hours and with all of the athletes in this other holding stadium that's full of television so you can see what's going on. And it's like a 7-hour process. So I was diving the next day after the opening ceremonies in Barcelona. So, you talk this out with your coach and you make decisions like, are we marching or are we conserving our energy? And, so we thought it best. I wasn't going to march in the Barcelona. Was going to be my last hurrah sort of thing. Or, it was my third Olympic Games. And I decided that I would watch it on television the night before and get a good night's sleep because the next morning I had to dive. And so that was a thing that happened. I did go to the closing ceremony of the Barcelona Games, and that was fantastic. And it just seems like every Olympics that I went to, it just kept on getting better and better and more incredible and more, just advanced or techno savvy or more athletes and just amazing. You just couldn't believe that it could keep getting better each time. They would keep outdoing themselves.
Competing at the Olympic level, there's obviously going to be a huge amount of stress and pressure on you to perform, and especially with diving, it's this. I don't even know how long a dive lasts, like 4 seconds or whatever it is, from jumping off the board. Less, okay.
Split second.
So you've got how do you handle stress and pressure?
Well, part of your training, besides the physical training that we do for diving, is mental training and visualization. And it's funny because people ask me now that I'm a yoga teacher, I kind of wish I had yoga way back then. But we did it in other ways, with the visualization and, kind of meditating. You watched yourself in your mind's eye. You close your eyes, you visualize yourself doing your perfect dive, or as close to perfect as you can, or your excellent dive. And this is what you do. You train mentally preparing for these things. And then, of course, all of the other competitions that you would compete in along the way between quadrenniums, for 4 years. That's a lot of time and a lot of meets you can go to. So you're basically practicing. And you try to practice. In practice, a lot of times when you do mock meets, you're very concentrated and you're trying to practice the way you would dive in a meet. So you do a lot of simulations. In terms of stress, there's positive stress and negative stress. So obviously you're trying to think positively, and obviously you're trying to channel your energies so you're not wasting energy into keeping it for yourself for your performance.
You talked about stress being both positive and negative, and then obviously you're aiming for perfection. Have you ever had problems with trying to be perfect? Has that ever I mean, just obviously because it's something that you do with diving, has that ever sort of crossed over into normal life?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. It's like, so when you're in a sport like diving and let me just clarify, nobody's perfect. So the scores are from 0 to 10, and 10 is not perfect. 10 is excellent dive. So yes, you're trying to get as close to perfection as you can, as close to, your highest score that you can get. So yes, of course, this spills over into your life. And I think that, I'll just speak for myself. I think that, well, personalities are formed, I think, by the age of 6 with people. So the type of person that you are, I think, would determine where your skills lie and what kinds of things one chooses to do or one gravitates towards. I guess as a little kid, I was, maybe intrinsically or extrinsically motivated by things to do. I wanted to do the diving because maybe I wanted attention. Maybe my brother got a lot of attention being the champion swimmer and the good student. And so maybe I was also seeking to, he was a hard act to follow. And so maybe I was looking for my own place. But I think that you do have to have some kind of a personality that drives you to do these things. So I was, and I do, and being a control freak type of person, detail where everything has to be just so. Yes, that's that's kind of how I am, and that spills over. And what yoga does for me, which is really funny, coming from such an elite level, high intensity judgment, critique type of sport, to yoga is something that everybody can do, and it's their own journey, and it's not about perfection. It's not about achieving. It's about your health and your well-being and your state of mind and dealing with stressors and being able to handle things as they are, sort of more of a detachment and helping your emotions not take control over you. So it's really quite a flip side of the coin for me, what I'm ending up doing now. And of course, I can't say I have arrived. I'm still this person with this personality. I love competition. I do love teaching yoga because I love to help people and impact people. And if they find it aspirational, that's great. But I'm really happy when I see people enjoy it or come up to me after class and just say, oh, that's just what I needed. Or, I love people to feel good. So I really like what I do now. And whereas coaching diving can be really frustrating sometimes because, again, you're chasing that perfection. And then when you're coaching somebody, it's not even you doing it. It's you trying to tell someone else how to do it. And it can be frustrating when you have to keep reinventing yourself and recreating what you're saying so that somebody can actually get what you're saying and learn from you and become a better athlete. So this is not anything you can really control. And yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. But so dealing with stress, yeah, positive stressors, negative stressors. I think, it's exciting. And so your adrenaline gets going if you like that sort of thing. And then you have to learn how to control this positive stressor, adrenaline, the stimulus, so that you can harness it and use it to your advantage. So you learn how to do these things as you're training and with your mental training and with your whatever routines you have or things that you do that work for you. You find out what works for you, and then you make those your routines, your go-to training tools.
Thinking back over your career, what has been the biggest challenge that you've had to face and overcome?
I would say that because I dove for Argentina while living in the United States, I would say that my biggest challenge was being financially backed properly. I mean, I'm don't get me wrong, I'm completely grateful and have been proud to represent my country that I was born in, but I only lived there until the age of 6. So I'm very grateful that being a citizen, they embraced me. But all of my training happened in, I grew up diving the Bahamas once we moved from Argentina, and then Miami, Florida. So I was coached by United States coaches. And my biggest challenge was getting to dive in enough competitions where the financial backing was not there as much as I would have liked it to be. I mean, Argentina did send me to the majors, the Olympics, the Pan American Games, the World Championships, to many major meets, but those meets, came about once every 4 years. And there were many other meets. Like I went to Europe. They sent me to Europe once for a tour where I went to Austria, Bolzano, Italy, and Czechoslovakia. But I did that one time, whereas all my other contemporaries were going every single year to this tour and gaining valuable experience that makes you a better athlete, because the more times you're experiencing these situations under pressure, then you're becoming more seasoned. And also you're being seen by all of the judges. And so you're becoming more of a somebody to be reckoned with, somebody who may be in contention, for a medal. But, if you're not making an appearance and they only see you once every 4 years, it's a political sort of situation, apart from the fact that you're not as seasoned, you're not as experienced. And so you may not be as good a diver as other people who've had more chances and more available competitions. So for me, my biggest stumbling block in representing the country I was born in was that I wasn't able to be sent to as many competitions as I would have liked to have gone to.
Moving on to the coaching, and I think, did you coach at Cornell? Is that right?
Yes, I coached at Cornell, but I also coached an age group team in Miami, Florida for 10 years after I retired from diving.
In terms of coaching, what have you found? I mean, I know everybody is different, but any top coaching tips or in terms of encouraging or motivating? And is there a difference between coaching? Did you coach women or men and women?
I coached both.
You coached both. How did you inspire the people that you were coaching to help them perform at their best? What were the tips and tricks that really worked for you as a coach?
Well, I think it's twofold answer, because I coached at a couple of different levels. So with the age group team in Miami, Florida, I coached anywhere from age 6 to 18 or so. And so children, kids are different, and boys and girls may be different, but when they're little and, they look up to you, and then you treat them like your own children, you hug on them and you whatever, but you also have parents to deal with. And like you said before, it's like some of those children are there because their parents want them to do it and they maybe have no interest. And so then it's frustrating for you because I became involved, because when I hung up my swimsuit and retired, it was after the U.S. Olympic trials, because the end of my career, I changed countries. I dove for the United States for the last 3 years after I became a citizen. And when I retired, it was after not making a fourth, I was trying to make a fifth Olympic team, one for the U.S. now. And so it was kind of a bitter pill, because I said, I'm either going on to Atlanta in 96 as a U.S. Olympian, or I'm retiring. That's it, because it's time to get on with my life. And so anyway, that apart, as soon as I retired, I was immediately coaching. So one thing that I'll sidetrack a little bit is that this depression that athletes, and especially high-level athletes and Olympians, go through when they sort of lose their identity, going from, I'm now no longer a diver, I'm now no longer an athlete, or, you feel like your career is over and you have to shift onto work or other things. And you sort of lose your, who am I? Because it's like, instead of saying, I'm Veronica and I have a balanced life and I do all these things, you can't, because when you're an elite athlete, you're doing mainly one thing so that you can be the best you can. So you're having all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And so you're so emotionally entwined with this that when it's over, you kind of lose yourself. And so I kind of since I went straight into coaching, it's still, this is looking back on this years later, trying to figure out where did my depressed person come from? Because I have suffered depression over the years, situational crises, but I try to trace it back to when is the first time? And I think that it's because of retiring from the diving and continuing to coach, I was still involved in diving so much that whether before it was my ego of my own diving, now it was my ego as a coach. Well, I have to make my divers good because then that's going to make me look like a good coach. Even though, of course, I still cared for the kids and it was very much of a high when they did well and they were happy and I was happy for them. The parents were happy. Everybody was happy. And you want the kids to do well. But in terms of trying to motivate them, I think maybe the little girls just looked up to me like, I want to be like her. Maybe that was motivating for them. I don't know about the little boys, whether they were thinking, I want to be like her or I want to be, a good diver too. And I'll just say that in the older age groups, and then when I coached college, I think that generally speaking, women are much more dramatic to coach. And I think that men are just, they're not as dramatic as women. I think having coached college-aged young ladies compared to college-aged young men, there are definitely big differences that way. And so, what tricks have I used as a coach? I will say that I have had some very good experiences coaching college athletes and a lot of parents that were very happy with me. And those were, I'll say more often than not, parents of young women divers, because I don't know, I kind of, I formed this bond with them that was kind of like what the parents would say, oh, thank goodness my daughter's in good hands because she's like a mom away from their mom. So I would bond with them, but I also understood them as a young person. I always felt like, and I could relate to them because I knew exactly, since I'd been through it all. I was like, I know what you're feeling. I know what I know what you're experiencing. And I would really try to get into their heads. And, to be a coach, you really almost have to be a psychologist as well. You really have to get into their head game to, see what makes them tick and how do they learn best. And it's tricky. It really is tricky. It's a difficult profession. Yeah, but yeah.
I was going to say, you talked about depression as well, especially at that time period from leaving the Olympics, leaving your identity behind and moving on from being a diver to being a diving coach. Was that when yoga first entered your life, or how did you handle depression at that time?
No, actually, I didn't really, I did not become depressed or realize I was. I think my first bout of depression was when I moved from Miami, Florida to Ithaca, New York. After my first season coaching here, my father became ill and he had cancer. And my father passed away my first year here. So I think that, I started having these situational crises that drove me over the edge. But my brother, who's a doctor, would say to me, if anybody has a reason to be depressed, it's definitely you, because you moved across the country as a single mom with 2 kids. I mean, I was married at the time, but I moved by myself with my 2 kids that were aged 7 and 9 when I got here to Ithaca. And my husband at the time was still in Miami, and he would come to visit us every 4 to 6 months. But he was not leaving Miami until we had to sell our house. So he stayed behind with the house. And so this went on for 6 years. I mean, I was a single mother for 6 years. And my ex-husband, well, then 2 years later, we ended up divorcing. We just said, you're there, I'm here, and maybe it wasn't great, when we were married, whatever. So we kind of just drifted and grew apart. But we still maintain a great relationship. But he didn't end up moving to Ithaca, and he moved here for the kids until 2013. So we're talking about 6 years later. And I raised my kids by myself through this time in their lives from age 7 and 9 for 6 years. That's a crucial time. And with traveling for Cornell and going to meets, I would pack 3 bags, one for myself to travel with the team, and 2 little bags for my son and my daughter to go off to their friends' homes for the weekend while I was away. So I had a lot of wonderful friends here and helping hands. And when I look back on it, I can't even believe, I'm like, how did I do that? By God's grace and my friends, because I couldn't, I get tired thinking about it, but I did that. And then I just think that when my father died, that was one of the hugest, I had to go on antidepressants then, and I was trying to continue functioning. In fact, he died 6 days before Christmas, and I was immediately on a Christmas training trip with Cornell 6 days after he died. And so I was on autopilot. I mean, I was just like hamster on a wheel, and now your job, your job, your job, your job. And there was no break for me with that. So it's something that I sort of had to shelf, and dealing with my sadness for the loss and the grief of my father while still trying to work and put on a good work face. And this was really difficult. And then, then spring came, and then the grieving for my father, that took a while, but I was on antidepressants for not a year, maybe 6 months or 8 months. And then I got off them, managed whatever. And then something else would happen, which, these things seem to happen in the fall. And so the third time around, my mother passed away in 2015. And so this has been kind of like, and also if you've ever heard of seasonal affective disorder, it's pretty common here in the Northeast. And when there's not a lot of sunlight in the wintertime, it's bleak and gray. And apparently your hormone levels, or, your brain chemicals kind of take a dive downwards. So people do suffer from seasonal affective disorder. So I think this was also kicking in. I mean, imagine I grew up in the Bahamas and Miami, where it's full of sunshine and wonderful temperature year round. And then I moved to what my brother calls the frozen tundra here in Ithaca, New York. I mean, we're closer to Canada than New York City. So we're in upstate New York, where it gets really cold and really gray. And so a lot of these depressing episodes, this started happening to me later in life, is what I recognized. I think it's different from the post-Olympic feeling of sadness and loss of identity. I wouldn't have even have recognized it back then as depression. I'm looking at it now thinking, I wonder if that was depression back then. But, I just thought I was sad because I didn't retire on the highest note possible. And that part of my life was kind of over, but then it really wasn't, because I was still coaching. So, I didn't know anything about depression. But then when I came up here and I started speaking to a therapist and dealing with my father's death and all of that, and this weather and whatever, and then the pressures at work and the intenseness of this Division I Ivy League coaching, and just, the rut of day in and day out, and keeping up the face of this and that, and all the rules and regulations and everything that you have to do as a collegiate Division I coach. So it wasn't easy. And then, and mothering 2 children as well. And being a head coach. And I was the only woman coach in the Ivy League for many years. I mean, 1 or 2 floated in and out of one of the Ivies, but for the most part, I was the only woman, along with 7 other men, diving coaches. So it was a big undertaking. Yeah.
Tell me more about the yoga. When did yoga enter your life?
Okay, so circle back around, let's see, 2011. It was after I was divorced, and I started dating somebody. It's the first person after 9 months after I was divorced. And I had already been apart from my ex-husband for 2 years, but we were still married. So after the divorce happened, I sort of started dating somebody. And mind you, I was married for 19 years. So really, I didn't even notice that somebody noticed me. I was like, oh, did he just, like, was he flirting with me? I didn't even recognize it. But when I started dating somebody, and then when that sort of fell apart and didn't go well after about a year and a half, And I was having a lot of pressure at work, a lot of pressure. I had a lot of anxiety. And so, apart from coaching the diving team, I also taught a physical education class called Introduction to Springboard Diving. So to make a little extra income, I was also part of a professor for a physical education class. So I would teach that class twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And immediately after that class was over at 12:15, the yoga class was starting in that same building. And so I would run over to yoga just to get a grip on myself. I had such strong anxiety that I could practically feel my heart beating in my out of my chest. And I ran there for a place to kind of stop time and for 1 hour of just breathing and nothing else. Because the yoga teacher would say, nowhere to go, nothing to do, nowhere to be. And for me, this really was like, oh my God, I was in such an anxious state that I felt at times like, stop the world, I want to get off. And so this is how I came to yoga. I found yoga in the most stressful and anxious-filled moments of my life as a place of refuge and healing and breathing, to get control of myself.
When did you decide to become a qualified yoga instructor?
So you figure I took this yoga kind of as a medicine in 2011, but I didn't really become any kind of a fervent yogi or practicing or even have my own practice or anything. So I just kind of went to yoga a couple times a week at that point. So we're talking about, it was 5 years later to 2016 when I left Cornell. And then is like I told you that I then started exploring my interest of, I left Cornell in 16, but I had met my current fiance in 2013. So he introduced me to the paddleboarding, right? So I started doing paddling with him and racing. And then when I left Cornell, I was like, oh, stand-up paddleboard yoga. That's for me. That's a no-brainer. That's what I'm going to get my certification in that. I found that there was in June. So I left Cornell in February of 2016. And then immediately in June, I saw that there was a training over here in New York in the Hamptons. And I said, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go do that. So I wasn't even a yoga teacher yet. I became a stand-up paddleboard yoga teacher first. And the actual certifier, she let me do it because she said, you have to either be registered to take your land yoga teacher training in order to do this. And you have to have your first aid and CPR. And I already had my first aid and CPR because I needed that for my Cornell coaching job. So that was fine. I was like, yeah, I am going to get certified in yoga. So I took my stand-up paddleboard yoga in June. And then in August of the same year is when I went to do my 200-hour yoga teacher training.
Did you go to India for that?
No, I wish. I really would like to go to India. It was actually 20 minutes down the road here in Trumansburg. I found one that was close enough to me that I could do it. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this because I'm pulling the trigger. I'm doing this right now. And, I was trying for the least expense, not necessarily. I mean, the fact that it was close to me was my driving force. And so that's the one I did because it was the soonest to happen, the closest to the home. I didn't have to fly anywhere. I didn't have to think about other costs. I could live at home while I did this. And they had it, it was intensive weekends for 9 months, and it was once a month or every 2 weeks. So it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you were completely, immersed in this. So it was from August to April. So August of 2016, I graduated April of 2017 in Anusara. So this is alignment-based, heart-centered yoga.
How do you find, because you've got your own business now, doing the stand-up paddleboarding and the yoga, how are you finding life now?
Well, two ways to think about it. Financially, it's a lot different because I don't have my Cornell salary or benefits anymore. So that's a financial issue. But I'm probably happier than I've ever been in terms of I have my flexibility. If I want to travel with my fiance out of town, if I want to go to a paddleboarding race, I can get a substitute to teach my yoga class. I teach at 4 different places. So, you know, and I don't feel like I have the scrutiny of somebody shining the light on me all the time, the big pressures of that. And I love the fact that I'm able to help people achieve a state of peace and tranquility and strength and flexibility. So it's impacting them in their life in many ways. And so that makes me feel really good. Like I have a purpose. There's a reason why I'm doing this. I mean, it just kind of happened by happenstance, the way these things kind of fell into place. But that's just kind of how it rolled. Yeah.
Are you still doing the stand-up paddleboarding racing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I raced. I entered 4 races last summer and I won them all. But that's just, I want to say, I don't want to be so braggadocious, but two really big racing girls that used to race with me when I'd come third all the time, they sort of went pro. So they left my scene, my little neck of the woods. But, and they're also like, well, let's see, one was probably 15 years younger than me and one was probably 25 years younger than me. So they were a lot younger than me. So I feel that at my tender age, I'm doing pretty well with my racing. I'm not thinking of doing anything ridiculous like hanging out until stand-up paddleboard racing goes into the Olympics because, I'm 56 years old, even though to me that's just a number, and I maintain my fitness levels and my enthusiasm. And, I'm kind of like my mother. My mother, God bless her, passed away at 91, but she never, and neither did I ever consider her an old person. She hung out with people 20 years younger than her because I would say, Mom, why? She would think she was with her grandparents if she hung out with people her age. So it's funny. I have younger friends than me as well as people my own age, but we don't really think about our age as, chronologically, I'm so old, and I definitely I don't think I'm like most average people my age in terms of physique and stamina and competitiveness. And well, obviously, because, as an Olympian, I was saying this to my husband, my ex-husband, one time. I was saying, well, Terry is my fiance, and he's also a 3-time Olympian in sprint kayak. So when we found each other, it was kind of like, we never met at the Olympics. We competed in the same 3 Olympic Games. But when we found each other here in Ithaca, it was kind of like, wow, soulmate, because we understand each other. We've done the same things. We've lived kind of a similar life, even though in different sports, but we went to the same 3 Olympic Games. We know what it takes, and we know what that training was about. We know what success is. We know what disappointment is. And so actually Terry was 4th place. He almost got a medal in the LA Olympics in sprint kayak. And he was of an era of U.S. kayakers that was the best that the U.S. has ever known, because usually that's a Euro sport. And anyway, but I was saying to my ex-husband one time, I was like, why don't people do this? And how come people aren't more like Terry and I? And my ex-husband said, because Terry and you are not normal. Don't you get it? It just made me laugh. But we have to kind of remind ourselves sometimes that we're like a different percentage of people. And it's just, I don't know, weird sometimes.
Yeah. What are your plans for 2019?
Well, we are hopefully going to compete in some more races up here in the Northeast. We're very humble because we compete up here in the Northeast, and as paddleboarders, we're old and we have fun, and if we break even, it's nice. If we win some cash money, it's great. I won some money last year. They have purses for the pro divisions. But really, we're not that great because, Florida and California, people that get to do this year round. I do train year round, and I put on my neoprene clothing, and you hope that you don't fall in the water because that could be hypothermia, and it's very dangerous to do that here. But we know we don't train as much as somebody in California or Florida because they have year round wonderful weather. We don't have year round wonderful weather. We have 3 months of summer. So we're looking for, to race again and travel and race. That's what we enjoy doing. And I guess we'll do stand-up paddleboard racing, and until we don't feel like it anymore or are too tired, or I don't know. I would love to go to India sometime. I really would love to go to India in terms of the yoga and all that. But my plans for 2019 in terms of other things like yoga is I'm going to probably be doing a retreat from my own experience in Key West with a friend of mine who is up in Massachusetts. She has a stand-up paddleboard racing team that she coaches. And she did this Key West retreat last year. And so she's invited me to teach some yoga classes. And so I'm going to fly down and help with her retreat just so that I can get the experience of teaching on retreat, on location. And then I'm going to lead my first retreat in the Adirondack Mountains in June at a facility that I get to rent from State University of New York in Cortland, which is one of the places where I teach yoga to students. And so we just, my fiance and I went by because we were visiting a friend of his up in Saranac Lake. So I asked him, can we please just drop by this place so I can see what the camp looks like? So we were out there. Of course, it was covered in snow and it's going to look much different in June, but I just wanted to just take a peek so that I could start advertising for it. And so I'm going to start advertising on my Instagram profile very soon when I get some summer pictures from the links and from the people at State University of New York in Cortland to do a sort of like a forest bathing and a yoga retreat, because you never know in June in the Adirondacks whether it's going to be still chilly or whether it's nice. But it's right on a lake. It's on Racket Lake. They have a couple of properties. And so that's what I'm looking to do in 2019 is expand my offerings. And so let's see, I teach at Cornell for Cornell Fitness Centers. I teach at State University of New York in Cortland. I teach at the YMCA, and I'm going to start another gig once a week at Finger Lakes Fitness Center. So I'm bouncing back and forth between 4 different places, and I teach 10 classes a week. But, I don't want to spread myself too thin, because already teaching 10 classes, it's not like I'm making tons of money, but I'm teaching more. I'm getting much more experience of teaching at a bunch of different places. And I'm not locked into like studio teaching.
Yeah.
So it's a good mix. It's a good mix.
Yeah. And Veronica, where's the best place for people to find more information out about you? What's your website, social media handles?
I'm Olympic Heart Yogi on Instagram. Yeah, and I've been mainly more on Instagram than Facebook nowadays, just trying to post stuff here and there. Basically, my website is about excellence, challenge, health.
What's your website address?
The website for the SUP yoga, which is very limited here, I'll say, because of the weather. And a lot of people still are not very into okay, I'm going to go pay to do yoga on a paddleboard, even though I have taken people out who have never stood on a paddleboard before and have never taken a yoga class before. So it's not like, people's main concern is, what if I fall in? I'm like, if you fall in, you just climb back on your board. It's not a big deal. You cool off. But that's why we have to wait for the weather to get warmer. So it's www.ithaca, ITHACA, supyoga.com. Ithaca, SUP, yoga.com. That's my website for the stand-up paddleboard yoga.
Fantastic. And
then I have a website for olympicheartyoga.com. www.olympicheartyoga.com. That's my land yoga. And so the handle for Instagram is Olympic Heart Yogi, YOGI.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, what I'll do is I'll make sure I put all of the links into the show notes, which will be available at Tough Girl Challenges. And just before we go, Veronica, would you just like to share any sort of final words of advice, words of wisdom, whether that's a quote, whether that's a mantra that you live by, whether there's just something that either inspired or motivated you that you think would inspire and motivate another generation of women and girls?
Yeah. You always see these kinds of quotes of live your dream life, live the life you want to live. I would say to people that if you have the support systems possible to do what makes you happy, being able to impact other people and share of yourself with others, then go for it. I mean, you have one life, and you need to be content with yourself and happy, and not be filled with anxiety or feeling like one day is rolling into the next all the time. I would say that people should practice gratitude for everything that they have. And I learned to do that every single day, and just realize how lucky I am, how blessed I am, to be able to have lived the life that I have had. And I'm just continuing to try to live a life worthy of, just being able to impact other people, and an aspirational life. I would just say that people should do what makes them feel happy, of course, while being responsible and everything like that. But if you have the support system in place to be able to chase your dreams, and I'm all about adventure and trying new things and meeting new people and just expanding your horizons, just makes you a better person all around.
Fantastic. Veronica, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your incredible life and your incredible journey. Thank
you so much for inviting me. I have to thank my friend Diane, who reached out to you. It's a lovely woman who also does yoga, and we just did a training together, and she reached out to you on this. And I looked at your website and I said, I don't think I'm half the person that some of these people that Sarah has interviewed.
We don't. No comparisons allowed. No comparisons allowed.
I really should know that as a yogi, right? Because we tell our students all the time, this is your journey, and it doesn't matter what anybody next to you is doing.
Exactly. It's just about you, and everyone's got a different life, different stories to tell, and everybody's story is inspiring. But brilliant. Thank you so much again for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. I look forward to talking with you another time. Thanks.
Hey tribe, thank you so much for listening to that episode. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend time with me and my incredible guests. I've talked about Patreon at the very beginning of this episode, but I wanted to reach out and get feedback from the patrons who are supporting me at the moment about why they chose to take action and support me every single month. So let's hear from one of them.
My name's Dave Davis. I've been supporting the Tough Girl podcast for around about a year now, and I decided to support a Patreon after listening to the first one because it was so inspirational. I was first put onto it by a friend of mine. We swam a lakes challenge about 10 years ago. We did 10 kilometres swimming different lakes up in the Lake District in aid of the Newman Holiday Trust, a children's charity that I'm involved with as a volunteer. I've always enjoyed expeditions and following expeditions. My job is a satellite communications engineer, and I've had the pleasure of supporting various different expeditions across the world, doing some really crazy stuff. The one that really stands out is a human-powered climb from the northern shores of the Dead Sea all the way to base camp of Everest using just pedal power on bikes only, and then the team summited Everest from there. So from the lowest point on Earth to the highest point of Earth. It's called Everest Max, a really great expedition. I just love listening to the stories of each individual on the Tough Girl podcast about their challenges, how they overcome them, particularly the female perspective, in which is a pretty predominantly male-dominated environment of adventure. It's great to see all these women role models coming into the adventure world. And as some of the slogans that we hear now on the STEM, trying to get people involved in science, technology, engineering and maths, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And having a lack of female role models is a real problem in the engineering industry as well as the adventure industry. So it's just fantastic to see that. That's why I support Tough Girl podcast on Patreon.
A massive thank you to Dave for being a patron for over a year. Absolutely incredible. And for also taking the time out to send that recording through to me. I really do appreciate it. It is so, so important that if you want to support the mission, if you want to support the work, if you want to support what I'm doing, that people do take action and actually log on and click onto patreon.com/toughgirlpodcast and sign up as a patron, whether that's at $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. It's not about the amount of money that you're supporting. If I got 2,000 people doing $1 $1 a month, that would be so life-changing for me in terms of what content I could put out there and how much of a difference I could make. At the moment, I'm limited by, well, as everybody is time and money, as in it is just me trying to put out this podcast every single week and also put out bonus content. So if you want to help me do that, then please do sign up as a patron. I'm really excited, but we have a special episode coming up. I've gone back to speak to Jessica Dixie Mills, and on this Thursday coming up, Jessica's going to be sharing more about her completion of the Triple Crown. So we first spoke with Jessica back in September 2016 after she completed the Appalachian Trail. Since then, she's gone on to through hike the Continental Divide Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail as well. It's another fantastic episode, and I couldn't put these episodes out without the regular financial support. So please do take action now. I know it can be a pain, and you're probably thinking, "Oh, I mean to do this every single week," but if you could do it, that would be incredible. Have an awesome day wherever you are, whatever you are doing. More information, as always, can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com. All right, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.